In this week's Family Guy, Chris becomes a cake-sitting superstar, Meg runs a fans-only page, and Stewie discovers yet another long-lost half-brother. So, was it an improvement on last week's disappointing episode? Well, let's get into it. Titled Boston Stewie, the story opens with Meg frosting some cupcakes to celebrate her period.
Or miscarriage. Not sure which. Either way, happy unbirthday!
This is followed by a public service type announcement stating that you can report that joke to the Texas Attorney General and collect a $10,000 bounty, which I guess is a joke far too American for my British mind to understand. Anyway, Meg briefly leaves the room and returns to find that Chris has squashed her cupcakes. So therefore decides to upload the recording to Instagram to, in her mind, shame Chris. But before we go into the other plot, let's follow through with this one, seeing as we are on a good roll here. So it turns out that Meg's post went viral and people really seem to dig seeing a teenage boy squashing food with his butt. And just for you guys, I did some research and I found out this is, in fact, a real life fetish. It's called sploshing and is defined by the sensation of playing with food. This particular delight is filed under the subgenre wet and messy fetishism on Wikipedia. So there you have it. Now, don't go thinking that you don't learn anything while watching my channel, and if that wasn't complete news to you, then you're a sick bastard. And as for the likes on Meg's post, I do wonder how many were from Herbert's many social media accounts. And speaking of the pervert, where the hell has he been? Has anyone else noticed he's pretty much disappeared from the show entirely? He was a huge part of the earlier seasons of Family Guy, but now he's just barely used at all.
And you need to come on down to the cellar. I got a whole freezer full of popsicles.
And for this story in particular, I'd have thought he'd have fitted in really well. This missed opportunity kind of got me thinking that maybe I should write a video on how they've erased him from the show, but do let me know down in the comments if that's something that you'd be interested in watching. But anyway, back to the story, and Meg approaches Chris with the idea of starting a page where people will pay them to watch Chris crush food. And he agrees, but only if she can get the capital first, which she does in a really stylish montage accompanied with a montage song that plays over this, which is kind of funny and it's a reoccurring joke that they'll continue to bring back later on in the episode. And if you listen to the song, it actually goes into how they wanted to cut the scene, but one animator had spent so much time on it that they felt really bad removing it. So now registered as an official business, the two get to work, and the first item that they're about to squash are lemon squares. We then get a very funny cutaway comparing their art to a famous French painter.
Were the dots tiny?
Oh my god, so tiny.
But later on at a restaurant, Chris overhears that people are making fun of his food squashing.
He'll sit on anything. He's a sit slug.
And this guy even asks him to sit on his wife's avocado.
Come on, man, I'm out with my family.
You Hollywood celebrities! Sheesh! Don't meet your heroes, huh?
But Chris wasn't amused, deciding to quit during their very next recording session.
I quit!
Now for me, I thought it was a bit too rushed here, like they could have had a bit more fun with Chris squashing more and more ridiculous food. I just think that time from them starting to him stopping was just too quick. Like, just add a quick montage or something of rows and rows of food and him just squishing his ass on it. Like, let's have that song back. So resorting to plan B, and Meg now replaces Chris with her dad Peter, but he thinks he's too good to sit on off-brand Jello. He needs the real deal for his tush. So Peter continues to be a diva and states that he won't sit on anything until Meg gets the stain out of his Emperor Palpatine cloak. And therefore this leads on to another montage song as she tries and fails to get it cleaned. This time the song states that the artist who drew these had a DUI and lost custody of his kids, which is the reason why they can't cut it. And it's after this that Meg and Chris finally have a heart-to-heart with Chris apologising for how he treated her.
It's okay, Chris. I forgive you.
We then see Chris out on street corners offering to sit on any food for money, and just before he commits to crushing a cookie sandwich with his knee, which is an act that is apparently far too hardcore and an act too far, Meg jumps in and puts a stop to it. She then gives him a box of buttercream muffins, which they then sit on together, which is cute, I guess. The episode ends with a final callback to the montage song before we actually cut to the animator himself on the phone to his son.
Well, the court says I get 2 guaranteed calls a week, so I'm calling.
Now, I have to say for me that the whole montage scenes were really funny, and ending the show with this guy was a really good touch. And the Meg and Chris side plot definitely wasn't bad, and I did quite enjoy seeing them happy together. The show has displayed before that out of everyone in the show, Chris has always been the closest to Meg, and I do like that they continued that here. But again, I do feel that they broke up their business far too quickly, and they could have had a bit more fun with it. And yes, the joke with the man wanting Chris to sit on his wife's avocado as if he's a celebrity was very funny, and that angle could have been played with more. But still, there were problems with it, like it wasn't really clear if Chris quit because he was too embarrassed as evidenced by the restaurant scene, or because his ego got too big, which we saw by the exotic animal scene.
Come along, multiple exotic pets symbolizing my spiritual corruption.
Either way, it was a little confusing with what they were trying to get across. It definitely had potential, and I did enjoy seeing Meg being the one to call the shots for a change and be shown as assertive while empathetic. But yeah, there was a bit of mixed messaging. Like linking back to Peter, it was fun seeing him almost praying to Meg because of her likes on social media. So why not have more fun with Peter willing to take Chris's fame to soak up some likes for himself? But enough of that, let's now move on to the main plot of the episode. Here Stewie is opening up a few letters addressed to Lois, and he finds that one of the eggs she donated was fertilized a while ago, and he is shocked by this, a feeling that he hasn't really felt since Chris showed him a jack-in-a-box.
What did you do to this box?
It's not called a jack elsewhere.
And I have to say that I did burst out laughing at that bit. Learning that he had a sibling out there somewhere, Stewie does some digging and finds out that they live in Boston. And when he arrives, he starts declaring some catchphrases, hoping his sibling would do the same thing.
Victory shall be mine, you know? Anything? That was big in the 90s.
And instead of finding a professor or a Harvard student as a half-brother, the self-proclaimed little genius sees his brother peeing on a welcome to Harvard sign. And I'm very frustrated to say that this appearance means that my Griffin family tree is severely out of date and I have to update it pronto. It turns out that Boston Stew was orphaned and that he and Stewie have nothing in common. Despite this, Stewie invites him back to his house, and when Peter finds him using his silly straws, he wasn't best pleased. But Boston Stew was so hardcore that he starts wailing on Peter with his own belt. This act makes Stewie realise that he can use his brother's Boston rage to get his own way, like getting him to beat up Lois in order to change his bedtime.
Your new bedtime is whenever you want.
And he gets Stu to pose as him at nursery so he can intimidate the teacher to make Stewie Star of the Week every week. Back at the house, Boston Stew sees Lois kiss Stewie goodnight and realises that he wants a loving mother too. Therefore, Stewie offers to help him get adopted.
I will help you get adopted.
What?
Now, I did find it a bit odd that Boston Stew wants a mum, finds out that he has a loving biological mum already right there, but he does nothing about it. He didn't even try to introduce himself to Lois and try and fit himself into the Griffin family. Now obviously I know they can't really do that because everything has to return back to the status quo by the end of the episode, but still. Like, he says he wants a mum just like Lois, well, here she is. Lois is your mum. Just go and say hi to her. I have to admit that I was fully expecting him to then turn his aggression towards Stewie and intimidate him instead, or disguise himself as Stewie to get the loving mama for himself. But they just kind of seem to get on, and I guess that's nice. The two babies return to Boston together to go to the adoption fair, and just when it looks like he's about to be picked up by a kind, lovely couple, Boston Stew beats the crap out of the dad for being a Jets fan. But that doesn't matter because he's instead adopted by a group of very Boston-like women. Which reminds me, thinking back, as soon as I saw the promotional images for this episode, I knew that it was just going to be a bunch of Boston stereotypes and Wahlberg Brothers jokes, and I was right, I counted at least 2 Wahlberg brother jokes.
Holy crap, it's Mark Wahlberg's 7 freckle-chested sister from The Fighter.
Plus, in my eyes, I just didn't really find Boston Stew to be that much of a funny character. Instead, I just saw him as a big excuse for the writers to throw as many Boston jokes as they could out there. Like, for example, take this show and tell scene where he takes everything out of his pockets.
Cumberland Farms reward card, shotgun shell full of shark teeth, Donnie Wahlberg's actual cigar cutter.
And I guess that's funny because Boston people have those kinds of things in their pockets, I guess. It's just the one joke really, and it's a very specific joke at that. I think for me personally, it would have been a lot more interesting to do like a Bertram style twist here, by introducing a half-brother antagonist that can drop in and out of the show when the story calls for it. I always liked the older Stewie and Bertram episodes, and by being related to Lois instead of Peter this time, it could have really been a funny twist. Either way, what we saw of his Boston brother, it wasn't bad at all, and at least I am very glad we didn't get yet another Brian and Stewie subplot for the 4th time in a row, so I guess there's that. Overall, this episode did give me some decent chuckles, and I do like the line about Peter's straws.
No, those are the fat man's. He likes to pretend his juice is on a roller coaster.
And the joke about the animator drawing the montage and learning about his sad life was a good reoccurring joke. But Chris and his cake smushing just didn't really do anything for me, and Boston Stewie was fine. I definitely enjoyed it a little more than last week's episode, so for that I'm going to round up my score from 2.5 to 3 out of 5.